All right. Well, we're back with another edition of Coffee with Coleman. As many of you guys know, coffee is my drink of choice. So I got a special guest today. I'm excited to sit down, learn a little bit more about him. I've had the opportunity to sit down with this gentleman in just a one-on-one capacity, but I'm excited to bring on Brian Gottlieb into Coffee with Coleman. So, Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, my friend. Good to see you.
Yeah, so this whole podcast is really geared around three things like sales, operational, and leadership mastery, and we're going to kind of dive into those, from a 10,000 foot view, and I'll ask you some questions, and then I'm hoping the audience can pick up on a nugget or two along the way here. So I got to ask the first question, which is, man, you started the company with $3,000 on a plastic folding table. Um, what was the decision and why did you decide to get into the home improvement industry? And then when did you know you actually had something?
Yeah, so look, I grew up in the home improvement industry, but I got really sick of I did a lot of consulting in the industry. I got tired of just being on the road all the time and missing dinner with my family and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to open up a company in Wisconsin. So yeah, I didn't have a lot of money. So it was $3,000 a folding table in the back of a buddy's very dusty warehouse. If you would have told me then that the business was going to build to $150 million a year, I would have laughed at you because I had no idea how to do that. But look, I think one of the first things, and I mentor a lot of young business leaders as they're trying to get started. And, it's the big debate of should the first hire be somebody that replicates your strengths or, you know, handles the weaknesses, right? And it's a great choice. I chose to make the first hire somebody that could replicate my strength so I could focus on other things inside of the business. And then the second hire was to offset my weaknesses. And that was like my core team in the very beginning. And look, once you start getting some traction, you realize, this is more than just kind of this little hobby thing. I think we can build a business here. It's pretty cool.
So at what point did you really realize that you weren't just building a home improvement company, but
Yeah.
a sales and a marketing and a
Yeah.
training and a leadership development product? Really? Because
Right.
that's how you exited. And I know that we'll get into that in a little bit. But when did you realize, like, okay, focus, I removed the focus from so that much the hustle, right, to really developing these people along the way in these different departments?
Yeah, look, I think every business has its seasons that it goes through, right? In the beginning, when you first start a business, it's all about staying in business. Like that's the only goal. How do I stay in business one more day? How do I get a
Right.
deposit to keep on rolling here, right? So, in the beginning, we viewed ourselves as a construction company, a home improvement company. Once I started getting 10, 12, 15 sales reps into the organization, we then thought we were more of a sales and marketing company that happens to be in home improvements. But the pressure still is, look, I'm going to make a prediction in 2027 right here on this podcast that
All
there's
right.
going to be a labor shortage next year. I'm just telling you that every year there's a labor shortage. And the question becomes, do we let that dictate our future or do we change the rules? And for us to grow, look, we had to shift from being a sales and marketing company to being a training organization where we can bring anybody in and develop them as talent, teach them how to run a business, teach them how to run a department, teach them how to swing a hammer, teach them how to close a deal. We just have to be in the business of training people because I can't rely on top talent just walking in my door saying, "Hey, I want to come to work for you." And,
Right.
and I think when you do that, all of a sudden you're not held back by the rules of the world. You create your own path, your own rules, and you can build a heck of a business.
I've had the opportunity to obviously sit down, like I mentioned when we got started here, and I sit down with you one on one. And I know you have a lot of passion around developing others.
Yeah.
Give us one of the best success stories you have about developing somebody that came into the organization, maybe in the beginning, somewhere in any season of the business,
Yeah.
and just share that story.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, let me share with you from a different lens first.
Okay.
Having had 600 employees, the thing I'm most proud of today, 5 years after having exited all my businesses, is that more than 40 people that used to work for me now have their own company. They now have their own business and they're doing things the right way and they're building really, really solid businesses. And I think it's, look, there, can I shine a light on certain examples? I remember this young woman that came to work for me and she was the most bubbliest person in the world. And I'm like, you need to be on TV. You need to be our spokesperson on television. And look, and she just soared and now she does that like for a lot of people. And I just think there's just so many different examples, but ultimately I wanted to teach them more than just how to do their role. I wanted to teach them how to think of their own business unit as a business inside of the business. If I could teach people how to be entrepreneurial inside of my organization, the business is going to be better off because of it. So that was really my focus. And there's just countless examples of the you could say, did I build a big business? Look, I think I built great teams and the great teams built a great business. How about that?
Yeah, that is, there's so much in that, right? And I think for all the listeners that are hearing that, that one thing, I'll be honest with you, that's what we struggle with in our organization is how do we take these department leaders and get them to think like we
Yeah.
think of as business owners? I appreciate that.
Yeah. And by the way, the reason it's important, in my opinion, look, there are a lot of disciplines necessary in business. The
Mhm.
single most important discipline in business is the ability to accurately forecast the next 6, 9, 12 months and then hit those forecasted targets with a high level of certainty. Okay. That's a real important discipline for business. And it could be anything from how many leads you need to what your closing average is to material cost and labor cost and revenue and all those kind of numbers and net profit percentages. I can't hit the targets by myself. I need my team to hit the targets. And
Yeah.
so for them to hit the targets, they have to think of their business unit as a business so they know when are they winning and when are they losing and what information do they need to look at every single day so they can fine tune their business unit. What do they have to speak to on a daily basis? How do they get rewarded around the things that they're ultimately responsible for? And how do we create a variable compensation structure all the way through the organization so that people can enjoy the benefits of hitting targets. And
Yeah.
when you do that, you're unstoppable.
Yeah, that's really good. What did you learn in the early version of Tundraland? And um, what went wrong or something that you would have changed? And how did
Yeah.
you kind of learn and develop yourself from
Yeah.
that experience?
Yeah. Well, there are a few truths to that, right? The first truth is when the company was doing $1 million a year, I never ran $1 million a year company, nor did I ever run a 5 million or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100. So we're always learning, right? We're always learning. And the lid of the team, I'm the lid of the team. Okay. I have to grow beyond what the team can do. And the business can't outperform individual performance of the people on your team. So if we want to grow our business, we have to grow our people. In the early days, when it's about survival, right? It's super easy to mistake cash for profit. In fact, our mission statement in the very early days was just sell stuff. Okay, that was it. Let's just sell stuff. And we sold a lot of stuff, but in all fairness, in the early days, we sold stuff that we didn't make money at. And while chaos can produce revenue, it takes discipline to produce profit. And that was one of the early lessons I need to learn to how do I shift this business from being chaotic and selling everything to a business that's disciplined and we only sell the things that make sense for both us and for our customers. And it becomes a more trainable business, a more aligned business, and a more disciplined business. That to me is a very, very important shift. And I see it at companies across the country that they're selling a lot of products and it's kind of like no single product is their focus. That is very challenging when you're trying to scale a business. The more you can simplify the business, I believe, the more scalable the company becomes.
Yeah, that's really good. I appreciate it. I want to jump into something that I had the experience to go through, which was Beyond the Hammer
Oh yeah.
and the book that you built. And first of all, I want to just draw some um, similarities to another author that I really like that creates these parables, right? And so I don't know if you've read Ideal Team Player, Five Dysfunction of the Teams, but that author in general kind of took me through a journey myself of
Yeah.
learning how to become a better leader and a better
Yeah.
business person and things like that. And I will say, and kudos to you, your book did the same, so much so that I've read it twice in the last 4 or 5 months here.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm going to
Thank
put
you.
you under the pressure cooker here because I think in the last part of this book, I do remember something to the effect of there's something else coming after it. Where did the idea come from, and what was the passion behind Beyond the Hammer?
Yeah, after I sold all my businesses, I think we go through stages, right? We go through stages as humans. In the beginning, when we're working somewhere or starting a business, we're just trying to master it, right? That's it's three M's really. The first level is mastering whatever we're doing. The
Yep.
second the second phase is once we get kind of good at something, I think we all want to mentor somebody. That's so cool about this industry. But once I sold all my businesses, then it was all about making a difference. I just wanted to make a positive impact in the industry that has done so much for myself and our family and the people that I know. So I wanted to write a book, and it took 2 years, and I started writing it as a leadership book. And I'm like, this is like, I don't want this to be another preachy leadership book. So
Yeah.
I wrote the first half as a business parable where it's a struggling contractor that anybody that reads it, the first chapter, it like punches you in the gut because you can relate to the story the guy's going through, right? I mean, we've all been there. But then I wanted to create what are the core pillars of leadership that would help that the character in the book transform, but then also not leave it vague, which is why the second half of the book is actionable, how to plug in those leadership principles directly into your business. So it was a 2 year process. It was really hard writing a parable. It was really hard because I think parables can be good or they can be terrible.
Yeah.
And if they're not interesting and engaging and relevant and they punch in, if they don't with friction and, so I think I nailed it. And, the results, I'm humbled how many books I've sold without even knowing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, you actually knocked it out of the park. I mean, kudos to you. It is a phenomenal read. Anybody that has not picked up the book, and I encourage you to do so. And not only if you're in home improvement, if you're in
Yeah.
business of any sort, I think it's relevant. So
Yeah, and the audio version is really good too. So there's an audio version, but I will share with you, I can tease something. So
yeah,
I'm 99% done with my second book. And the second book is a sequel to a parable. So in the first book, as you know, Marty Gold is mentoring a business owner.
yes.
This next book, Marty Gold is mentoring a salesperson. So it should be a great fun read for people.
I can't wait to read it. That's good. Do you have a launch date, or you have an idea when it might come?
So because I've got good news and bad news, right? The 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 bad news, it's taking longer than I want. The good news is because Simon and Schuster picked it up for distribution, which is a
Yeah,
big deal for me. So for them to get it all into their distribution channels, the book won't be ready until towards the end of the year, but it'll be available hopefully for pre-order around October.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's a book that, and I know we've talked about it, and I haven't performed on this yet, but it's a book that I want to share with my organization and my customer base because I
Yeah.
think that there's so much relevancy to it.
Yeah.
Again, if you haven't read the book, go get it. I want to jump into sales mastery again, and I just have some notes here. When you look at a sales organization, and you talked about that, like originally you thought you were in sales and
Yeah.
marketing, and
Yeah.
that's what you were
Yeah.
doing. What tells you right away whether it's built to scale or built to survive? And
Yeah.
how do you come up with these metrics so that you can forecast those 6, 9, 12 months out?
Yeah. Well, look, being a salesperson in this industry, it's a solo sport. You're out driving around, you get stuff that's in your head, you got all that stuff going on. And I think when results aren't what they need to be inside of a business, right? A business leader or a sales manager has a couple of options on how to fix it. The first thing is they tend to default to technical solutions. In other words, let's go back to the script, let's go back to practice, let's go back to all those kind of. But a lot of times there's an adaptive component too, where it's people are just thinking stuff is in their head that needs to change. We got to change the way they're thinking. We got to fix the adaptive side. Companies that are built to scale get that. They understand sometimes we have to approach problems from a technical standpoint, and other times we have to approach the mindset of the people on the team. But the best businesses out there understand that you also have to build a culture of accountability. Leads are expensive. They are very, very expensive. And if you don't have strong accountability and good bench strength inside of your business, you can spend a ton of money on marketing and not see the return and actually grow yourself out of cash.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about building the bench. Somebody, that led obviously an organization of your size.
Yeah.
How did you fundamentally build the bench in
Yeah.
the sales department
Yeah.
as this thing grew?
Yeah, I ran a very different org chart inside of my sales team and in other departments as well. The classic org chart is like you have one sales manager, and then you have like 20 sales reps.
Right.
And maybe you give them an assistant sales manager. And
Yeah.
the best that sales manager can do is focus on the bottom performers. But the middle and top really get left out, and we're doing nothing to build bench strength. So we set up what was called a squad leader program. The entire org chart was pods of 4 people, one person being a squad leader. The squad leader was still a co-producing sales rep, but they were also responsible for doing morning rah-rah calls with their other squadees on their team, with checking paperwork, taking a call here and there, maybe picking up a ride along when they don't have an appointment. They weren't doing it necessarily for the money. They were doing it for the exposure to leadership. So the sales manager could then work with the squad leaders, and the squad leaders could work with the squadees. When you have 20 squad leaders in your business, we had over 100 sales reps. So you have 20, 30 squad leaders. These are all people that are ready for that next opportunity. So when we want to open up another market, or we want to take on another product, or we want to do something, or somebody leaves us, we have so much bench strength of people that have been exposed to leadership that we can slip right into that role. And look, I think it's a great org chart, and a squad leader is typically compensated based on, of course, they get their own individual commissions, but also the other performance bucket is based on team performance, how well their squad performs. So they start thinking like a business owner. And
Yeah.
we had it where each squad had their own names. So they had, like, there was Sammy's Shower Slingers and all these other squad names. And the squads would compete with each other on any given month. And it was great. So when you take people out of training and they're not going into a sea of salespeople, they're being assigned to a squad, and they automatically have a little group of people that they can relate to, and is very, very helpful for retention and for performance.
Yeah, I love it. I want to talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the first time I was ever introduced to you or exposed to you and kind of your message to market, or your message to business owners and
Yeah.
sales reps, was this idea of FUD.
Yeah.
And I think we all go through it, even from my seat in the organization. I have some level of fear, some level of uncertainty and doubt. I'm sure you
Sure.
went through that. Kind of walk
Yeah.
us through where this whole message to market came from, and really how you coach around that or consult around it.
Again, like we said earlier, we're all doing things we've never done before.
Mhm.
Can we just normalize that? Okay. Let's just normalize that. Okay. And when we're doing things we've never done before, we don't always have all the answers, right? If only we knew how the outcome would be when we make decisions, but we don't. So we're loaded with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. Look, your customer is loaded with FUD when you're trying to sell them something. They have their gravitational pull to the status quo about their fear of change and their fear of, am I making a good decision? FUD is everywhere. And it's very present when we're bringing people onto our team and we're asking them to do things they've never done before also. The difference is, as the owner of a business, I can have FUD, but it doesn't mean I'm going to quit my job. I own the business. I can't leave. It's my business. But your team can. If FUD becomes too much of a factor in their life, they'll quit. They'll go somewhere else.
Mhm.
Which is why one of the pillars of my book was the idea that belief is transferable. That the more we believe in people and vocalize why we believe in them with substance behind it, the more willing they are to grow. It's If we want to
Right.
create a business, we're going to ask people to go to a level of performance that they've never been before. They don't even know that they can get there. By somebody else believing in them and telling them why we believe they can get there, they're much more likely to go on that journey and surprise themselves. And look, and I think when you do it right, you're no longer providing a job, you're no longer even providing a career. You're actually providing people with a pivot point in their lives, that they look back on their time working with you and they say, you know what? I did things I never knew I was capable of, and I'm a different person because of it.
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks for sharing. Let's go
Yeah.
back to um, you talked a little bit about the cost per lead. And I know a lot of people in home improvement industry, and I get exposed to this pretty much weekly.
Yeah.
And it's not going away. It's probably not going to go down anytime soon. But what have you learned about lead generations that most business owners still underestimate?
Yeah. So look, I'm invested and on the board of a couple of companies. Engage, the presentation tool, TrueVolve, the website company. So we see a lot. I see it, plus the business that I had and all the mentoring that I do for different people in the industry. And look, there it's easy to want to blame the lead. Okay. Yes, lead cost is higher. Okay.
Yeah.
It's definitely more challenging there. And I think a lot of companies have fallen in the trap to make too much of their mix lead aggregators because it's easy to get a lead. But when you're doing that, you're not doing anything to build your own brand. And you have to do both because if you're not focusing on building your brand, it means you have to keep buying lead aggregators, and those are competitive and the price is going up and up and up, and they're a little more challenging to convert. But an organization that does well, first of all, understands how they think about their brand in the communities that they serve and how to communicate those messages in ways that matter, but also the life of the lead. What do we want that experience to be? How quickly do we call it? How do we be the first ones to call it to interrupt their shopping pattern? How do we make sure that we're issuing it immediately to a salesperson? How do we ensure that our salespeople are trained to convert it at the highest possible level? And how do we build a team so that we have maybe more salespeople than we have appointments, so we can always run a batting order, taking our lower performers out of the mix and bringing them back in house and retraining them. That whole process is very difficult to replicate, but is very necessary to build. I see companies all the time spending a lot of money on marketing, knowing that they don't have the rest of that infrastructure put in place. And really it's about inspecting that customer journey. See how quickly are we calling a lead? What are we saying to them when we get them on the phone? What are we doing when we're in the home? If you get really good at that, again, you're going to have a heck of a business.
So let's go into that, right? Like, what do you believe non-negotiable sales standards are for every rep, every sales manager, and what should they really live by when it comes to this whole infrastructure and the process of acquiring a lead in the marketing, right? And then taking it all the way through the cycle
Yeah.
of that lead.
Yeah. So look, I want to take that question a little bit different. I'm going to go slightly different rabbit hole with it. If I were to ask all the people listening or watching to this, how many of you need to do a better job building out your SOPs? I bet everybody would raise their hands, say, yep, I know I need to do a better job with it.
Yeah.
And here's the truth. We were probably doing $20 million a year before we had great SOPs starting to be built out. More important than SOPs are business disciplines. Like, what are the core disciplines of the business? And I'll give you an example. Like in marketing, like we were just chatting about, a business discipline is the lead is sacred. Okay. That's if everybody in the organization knows that the lead is sacred, all right, it's going to get treated better. Now, we can talk about what systems and processes we need to treat it that way, but the overarching way we think about leads is that they're sacred. When we think about production, when you get paid, when you're done, you get paid in full. That's a business discipline. We can talk about what systems and processes we need to get there, but the discipline is timeless. We get paid in full when we're done. In sales, it's pretty simple. We run a full presentation every single time. That's what we do. Okay, that is a core business discipline. What does the organization need to do to make sure that happens? Well, that's a whole nother thing. But I think if we want to have a discipline if we want to have an organization of accountability, we got to make sure that everybody knows what the business disciplines are before we start trying to teach and write a whole bunch of SOPs.
Wow, that's powerful. I get caught up in that, right? We're doing a certain, level of revenue. And I think the correlation from what is the discipline in the organization from what is an SOP that's not something I've never heard. So
Well, and Josh, like we were talking about earlier, the
Yep.
difference between technical and adaptive, right?
Yep.
You could have the greatest SOPs out there and still stuff isn't going right. So we think we
Correct.
got to add another SOP. We got to add another SOP. Maybe what you need is to apply a discipline to the business, which is more the adaptive side. The adaptive side tells people how they should think about what they do. The SOP tells them how to do it. We
And that's
have to have
building the
both.
leader,
What's that?
right? And that's building the leader, right? To get the business unit leader to think that way, to be adaptive to whatever the situation is.
Correct. We need to do
Yeah.
both, right? We need to tell them how to do it, but we also have to teach people how to think about what they do so they do the SOPs.
Yeah, so good. Let's talk. I want to just stay on the sales thing for a second. Like,
Yeah.
what separates the strong from the weak? And really, do you think, like, how did you develop strong
Uh,
sales managers, stronger sales reps? Like, how did that process look inside of
you,
your organization?
you have so teed me up for my book that I'm writing. That was like a softball question. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah.
So look, I could do a training class. We could do a training class. We had, again, well over 100 sales reps. We could have a training class with 20 sales reps for 2 weeks in a training class, right? We can teach them the same product, the same sales process. We can give them the same pricing tools. We can give them the same leads, and they get out in the field, and we will see wildly different results.
Mhm.
Wildly different. And it's not that one sales rep is 5% better. It's one sales rep is 10 times better than another. That's the thing about this industry. And you look at throughout your business, the difference between the bottom performers and the top performers in home services and home improvements, they're 10 times better. So what do the top performers do differently, right? What do they have in common? And I think it's the same thing that the top plumbers have in common, the top CEOs have in common, the top athletes have in common, the top doctors have in common. It comes down to one thing: it's love. They love what they do. That love fuels their desire to be excellent at it. They love the customer. They love the grind. They love the pitch. They love the numbers. They love the industry. They love it. So to me, how do we get people, instead of just teaching them a sales model, how do we get them to love the industry, right? And I write about this in this new book quite a bit, because ultimately, when you think about it, what salespeople sell, regardless whether it's soap, whether it's showers, or whether it's HVAC systems, we sell change. We sell change to whatever somebody is doing now to something that they're going to do differently. Change. When we think about selling change, that means that we're taking people through change. And if we're taking people through change, do we need sales skills or do we need leadership skills? Because to me, sales is more about leadership than it is about selling. And if we can provide leadership skills in the sales world while teaching people to actually love everything they do, you're going to have a whole lot of top performers, I promise you.
That's really, really awesome. Let's walk through kind of leadership skills. You talk about your business unit and to get them to think like an entrepreneur at
Yeah.
the, the kind of thought process you have as the owner of the organization. You talk about belief is transferable. How does a leader transfer belief into their team that's tired? Maybe they're frustrated. The culture is really crappy. Like, how does somebody transfer that belief to get to get change?
Yeah. Well, look, those are all symptoms of a bigger problem, right? If somebody's burnt out, that's not the problem, that's a symptom. If somebody feels overworked, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. If there's a crappy culture, that's a symptom of a bigger problem, right? And when we think about culture in general, culture is, a shared set of thoughts and beliefs amongst your team, right? And how they think is how they behave, and how they behave is how the business does, right? So look, we have to set it right in the beginning. We have to make sure that everybody in the organization has the right mindset. But more importantly, we also have to make sure that everybody in the team has a voice. If somebody's frustrated or burnt out, do they feel comfortable enough talking about that they're busy putting out fires all day long? A lot of times the fires that they're putting out is what's burning them out, and
Yeah.
it's just frustrating, problem after problem after problem. But are we empowering them to fix the problem, to really get to the root cause so these problems don't occur anymore? You see it a lot from the when the baton gets passed from sales to production, right? A lot of
Yeah.
times production people don't like salespeople, and salespeople don't like call center people, and it's all there's this friction between departments. But a lot of times it's because we're not zooming out of the business and fixing some of the core challenges of the business. We're just dealing with the symptoms, and we're firefighting all the way along the way. Look, I think if every business unit inside of the business has to think like it's its own business, and they have to understand that if I'm in the sales department, I am a customer for the marketing team, but I am a supplier for the production team. If I'm in the marketing team, I am a supplier of leads to the sales team. And then we can start having conversations around how can we all be better suppliers and customers for each other? And really kind of breaking down those barriers of friction. And that's really going to do a lot of good things for your business.
Let's talk a little bit about what you brought up, which was resolving issues.
Yeah,
Uh, issue processing. There's a million ways that I could talk about it, but how do you get to the root cause of the issues? So we've talked about symptoms and then what the root cause
right.
are. Like, how did you do that throughout the growth and the trajectory that you experienced?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Whole other question.
Sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's big things. I'll give you an example of a little thing. In our business, we had a customer care department, which was responsible for the customer journey from point of sale to point of install. Okay. And when a job is sold, the baton is passed to customer care. Okay. So the customer doesn't have to call the salespeople anymore. They have a single point of contact. If that customer care agent can't answer a question for the homeowner and is passing voicemails to other departments, that's a terrible customer journey. But more importantly, it's a reflection of a problem inside of our business where somebody's not being empowered to make a decision or they lack the training necessary to do so. So look, we very simply plugged in a incident report. I wanted to know every single time a phone call is being transferred. Because if we're transferring a phone call, it's either a sign of lack of training or lack of empowerment. So which is it that we need to fix? Because the ideal customer journey is the call never gets transferred. Other areas. I'm working with a company. I'm doing some mentorship with a company, and it's a new company. And obviously, you can imagine the challenges that happen on installs when you're a new company. So I said, start sending me what's going on, and they send me these long emails summarizing all the problems that happened on this install. And that's hard to fix, right? So to me, when you have a problem in the business, starts by simply state in one sentence what is the issue. Then we start drilling down is by asking a series of why-based questions. Okay, why, why, why? At some point, we will get to the core problem. Okay, but then we have to identify how do we fix that? What change are we going to make in our organization so this problem never occurs again? It takes time, but I'll tell you what, it's very effective when you do it.
Yeah, I want to sit in that for a second
Yeah,
because we struggle with this in our organization
sure.
too. The statement gets put on the issue list, and it's really not a statement, it's a summary of the bigger problem, or it's a symptom of a bigger rooted problem issue. When you have an employee that states the issue, and then you ask a series, maybe it's leadership, maybe it's other departmental leaders, whatever it may be, they're asking why based questions. Does the issue statement ever change?
Well, I think no, I don't think because the issue is what caused the issue. So I don't mind the statement being timeless. Okay. And I'll give
Okay.
you an example with this one particular fella. He was the issue was the they didn't get paid for a job because this custom piece of glass for their shower door wasn't ready. Okay. After a whole bunch of series-based questions, they realized, well, that the root cause was the sales rep sold something that wasn't on the price list. That was the issue. They shouldn't even have sold it to begin with. Okay. So yeah, the custom glass didn't fit because guess what? They're not good at supplying custom glass on showers and they should never even sell it. So
Uh,
but that first statement, is a necessary one to truly get down to what needs to change. What needs to change is, make sure the price list is only things that you want to sell and that they're not allowed to sell anything that's not on it. It's kind of pretty basic, right? When you get there with it.
Understood. Let's talk a little bit about operations. You said, you called it the law of the lid, I think is what you mentioned earlier, but you said a business cannot grow beyond the capabilities of the person inside it, maybe
Yeah.
the leader
Yeah.
inside it. How did you fundamentally raise the lid on
Yeah.
your departmental leaders?
Yeah. One of the biggest difference makers inside of my organizations when growing was moving from monthly targets to weekly targets
Hmm.
to daily targets so that every single person had a daily target that they need to speak to every single day. They had a daily KPI that they needed to speak to. I needed to drive those KPIs deep into the organization. And instead of me telling them how they did, they needed to report upwards on how they did against target. And they would report on two numbers. This was my target. This was my actual. It could have been number of appointments set at a mall. It could have been number of canvassing appointments set. It could be number of net issued appointments against target. It could have been, this was our number of sales against target, but everybody had a target daily. And what that did for them is it allowed them, look, if you and I decided that you don't want to sell soap anymore and I don't want to write books anymore, okay? We have this massive desire to open up a hamburger stand in Scottsdale, Arizona, okay? And so we'll only be open in the winter because it gets hot out there in the summer.
Exactly. Right.
You and I, do you know anything about opening up a hamburger stand?
No.
No, I don't either. However, without any training whatsoever, we probably both know we need to count the cash register at the end of the day, right? If we know nothing else, let's count the cash register. Mm-hmm. How do we give our team a cash register to count at the end of every single day? And that's kind of what daily KPIs do. They give the leader of that department and the people inside of it a cash register to count. It's not that they always hit target, but it allows them to understand, gee, this was my target and I'm missing it. And what am I going to do to fix it? What I'll share with you is most businesses, it takes a week or two to close out financials. So when you're looking at the financial performance of a business, it's like 2 weeks ago. That's like a lifetime ago in the home improvement industry. So it's an autopsy. The patient lived, the patient died. If I know that our different units are hitting their KPIs with consistency, I already know how the P&L is going to come out. That just proves what I already know to be true. If you want great insight to how you're doing in your business, apply daily KPIs and you'll know exactly what's going on all the time.
How good do you think, the companies that you're consulting with or that you've mentored in the past, business owners, like, how important is that in the overall thing? And I know the answer, it's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's crucial. I mean, it's crucial. It is, again, and I've plugged into other companies that I mentor, and the consensus is it's a total difference maker. Is it because, again, these business leaders are, and look, here, what happens when somebody's missing targets for a few days in a row? If they miss target, and mind you, okay, I own a company. When I own a company, I'm living in the sales report. Okay, I'm looking at the sales report every 10 minutes. Okay, do we sell anything? Do we sell? So, but it doesn't do me any good to know the sales numbers. I need the sales manager to know the sales numbers. But so when somebody is missing target, it's not like I tornado them if they miss target for one day. But if they start missing targets for a few days in a row, it's a conversation. And the conversation includes three questions. Number one, what are the reasons we're missing target? Number two, what steps are you taking to fix it? And number three, by what date will we be back on target? What that does is it shifts the ownership to the person leading the department. And it tells me, can they identify the core problem? Can they come up with the steps to fix it? And three, can they put a time and date to it? And if they can do all those three things, they're going to be great leaders. And that's how we grow people, giving them, it doesn't do any good to say, you need to start having more sales trainings with your team. Well, that might be the answer, but maybe there's a better answer that they could find.
Yeah, that's really good. You talk about the pillars of in your book, the back half of the Beyond the Hammer. What are these pillars? Where did you come up with them? And how did they come to life? And then how did they get published in a book so that you could teach others how to do it?
Look, they've all come from some place in my life that, I think about the one pillar of, leaders are aware of the echo of their voice, right? And it's the idea that if you're having a bad day and you show it to your team is going to have a bad day. How we show up matters. Your team is going to decide what kind of day they're going to have based on the kind of day you're having. I used to work for somebody that was just absolute impossible to work with. I never knew what they were going to be like when I showed up at work. So I didn't know how I should be, right? And sometimes I'd want to hide under my desk because I didn't want I didn't want to get my head chopped off, right? Because they were like being a tornado, and that's never good. So some of the lessons are from experiences I went through and how I didn't ever want to lead a business, but others were needs that I saw in our business, specifically when I think about the that managers need a checklist, that we're putting these people into a management role. Usually it's out of a need because all of a sudden they need a manager, and there's no real good training for managers in our industry. There's no formal training program. So I wanted to create a great training program for managers, and that's that. And we deployed it in our businesses, and it really made a big difference because the manager is really the custodian of your company's culture. If they get it wrong, you're going to have a lot of turnover. If they get it right, you're going to build a machine.
Love it. The trajectory of your growth was significant.
Yeah.
And, we'll talk about the exit here in a minute, but as you went through the process of maybe taking an employee that became a manager, or you had this need to have a business unit leader, did you hire from within? Did you develop from within, or did you go to the outside to seek, expertise there?
With only a couple of exceptions, everybody was grown from within. Everybody was grown from within. I wanted to make sure that I was creating a training organization and exposing people to leadership before they were leaders, so that I could really see how do they, when you start to give somebody a little bit of responsibility, how do they treat that responsibility, right? Does the power change them? Does the power make them better? Does the power make them a jerk? I wanted to make sure I'm giving everybody, a lot of people, a chance to have some exposure to leadership so that they can understand, so I can see how they're going to perform. Look, when it came time to hire a CFO, I'm not the right guy to onboard a CFO. I looked for a really great CFO and found one. I also remember bringing on, I needed a chief marketing officer. So I went out and got Amy Zimmerman, who's just an incredible CMO. So we were already probably doing 90-ish million dollars, but I needed a really strong CFO to get me from 90 to 150. So she was great.
That's awesome. I want to talk about exit,
Yeah.
legacy, what Brian's up to next. You sold the company to outside buyers. You also sold one to your leadership team in another company. Walk us through uh, how that process went, what those
Yeah.
exits actually taught you, and then how do you
Yeah.
consult others that are thinking this way
Yeah.
to kind
Yeah.
of set their organization up for the next steps or the next chapters in their life?
Yeah, I sold three different businesses. So one of the businesses was a bath business in Arizona called Jacuzzi Bath Remodel. And I sold, and Jacuzzi themselves wanted to get into they wanted to have their own retail stores. And they didn't have any. So they needed a platform to replicate. So they acquired my business, the private equity group that owns them, and they used that as a template to open up multiple locations. So today they're in like they have like 20 markets now. So that was it was a great experience for for myself and for everybody else that was part of the team. The second business I sold was Tundraland, which I sold to Leaf Home Enhancements, another private equity group.
Yep.
And the third business that I sold, it was a couple of Renewal by Andersen window companies. And I sold that to my executive leadership team because I wanted to give them a chance to really have generational wealth, and they are doing. I'm humbled at how good they're doing. They've doubled their business. I still sit as the chairman of the board of that business, but they've doubled the company since I sold it to them in the last 5 years. It's incredible. But look, what I've learned is this. First of all, the reason I wanted to sell, let me start there, okay? I got to the point, and I think everybody has to have their own answer to this. I got to the point when the businesses were so big that I started to become a little more risk averse, that I started to have more of a scarcity mindset when it came to growth instead of an entrepreneurial mindset. I was 60 plus years old, and I'm thinking to myself, if I get hit by a bus, my wife is going to step in and run all these businesses. That wouldn't be good. So I needed to start to think about who's the next people to take this over. And I had such a great team with a lot of locations in various states that they had strong legs and they wanted to run hard. So how do I set them up so they can run really hard under a different structure of ownership? I think if you're thinking about selling your business, you got to be clear on what you want to do next. I didn't want to just sit on the couch and eat potato chips or play golf. That's not my thing. I wanted to give back to the industry. I want to write books. I want to make a difference in this community, in this world. And And that gave me the freedom to do so.
Yeah, you talk a little bit about the three M's, and it's probably fair to say that you're in the last stage of the three M's, making a difference.
Sure.
Um,
Every day.
what's Brian got up next, right? I know you're doing a lot of things, consulting, sitting on boards, writing books, things like
Yeah.
that. Like, what's your real passion, man? Like,
Yeah. I
what are
do
you
very
doing?
little. I do very little paid consulting, by the way. I do
Okay.
a tremendous amount of donating my time to the industry. You know, the thing is, I mean, look, do I have a couple of people that pay me for some stuff? Yeah, but it's not what I chase. It's the the money doesn't move the needle in my life anymore, which I know that sounds a little weird, but it's very freeing. So I get to really be selective on what I do. I just want to help people, you know, and some of these young business owners that are struggling, the last thing they need is to start paying somebody like me a lot of money, and especially if that person doesn't know what they're talking about. But so, man, pick up the phone, call me. I'll help you out, man. I'll get on a call with you. We'll chat. We can chat once a month. So and I am invested in other businesses that support the industry, whether it's Engage or One in Fund or One Click Contractor or TrueVolve. So I really like that. I like participating in those businesses, but also I'm just going to continue to write books and speak at conferences and try to make people's lives better.
You know, I can speak from this. I speak to this from personal experience. You know, Brian and I didn't know each other probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 18 months ago. You've been nothing but super humble in the whole process. Every time I've reached out to you, you've been great to respond back. So from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate that,
Oh,
man.
all good, man.
And
All
yeah,
good. You're
that's
doing
all.
some great things out there. It's fun
Yeah,
to
I appreciate
watch.
that. Um, let's talk a little bit about this. And last question I have for you, but for an owner that's doing 10 million to 30 million, who wants to build that something sellable,
Yeah.
scalable,
Yeah.
something special to, write their legacy, so to speak.
Yeah.
What hard truth would you tell them first?
Well, well, first of all, most companies, their financials are not on proper accrual accounting. So the numbers in their business aren't representative of how the business is actually doing, especially on how a buyer is going to view those numbers. They're very specific and particular on how they want your financials set up. And if your deposits are hitting your P&L, that's a problem. Okay. And you're probably not a sellable business, or you're going to be a discounted business. The other thing is that the in our industry, they're not buying a manufacturing company that has a long list of customers that you're serving. There are no previous customers unless if you're in some kind of recurring revenue business. What they're buying is they're buying the future. They're buying the belief that this organization can hit future targets, right? So the best proof of that is that being able to hit present targets. If you can prove you can hit present targets, you can prove you can hit future targets. And they're not buying customers, they're buying your leadership team, they're buying your culture, they're buying your processes, they're buying your story of how you're going to grow, they're buying your reputation, they're buying your brand. And if you do those things right and your numbers make sense and everybody's set up properly, you have a very sellable business. And if you ever want to reach out to me and talk to me about it, I'm always a phone call away. I'm happy to help on anything like that.
Yeah, you've introduced me to the guy that helped structure your exits, and so I appreciate that again. I mean, we
Yeah.
had to speak with that gentleman over the last couple days, and so it's been really good. Um, Brian, there's many ways to find you. Nothing but a humble servant heart, and I appreciate that as mentioned. But just tell the audience, man, if they want to get in touch with you, they want to follow your journey, they want to buy your next,
Yeah.
they want to buy your existing book. How do you get a hold of Brian?
Yeah, well, my existing book is in on Amazon, so you can get the audio of it's in the airports. If you're walking through an airport, make sure to look for it. If it's a Hudson bookstore or something like that, Barnes and Noble. But if you want to get a hold of me, my website is briangottlieb.com, or just ping me on Facebook. I'm really active on Facebook. I'm not very active on LinkedIn or anything like that. But yeah, reach out to me if you have troubles with something. You want to pick my brain, you want to just grab a coffee, let me know. Okay. Josh, I really appreciate the difference you make in this industry. I think it's so cool that you do this podcast trying to help people grow. I know that your heart comes from a wonderful, loving place. And I think that's really cool. And I appreciate everything you do as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Brian. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously, I hope you guys are able to take a nugget or two out of this. This guy's worth a lot of experience in the industry. And so, Brian, from the bottom of my heart, again, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye now.